You're an embarrassment to this family. My stepmother sent that text at 11:42 on a Tuesday night. No preamble, no context. Just that sentence sitting there on my screen like a verdict. I read it twice. Then I noticed my dad had liked it. I set my phone face down on my desk and stared at the wall of my apartment for a long moment. Outside, Portland was doing its usual thing. Gray sky, light drizzle, the distant sound of the Amex train. I'd moved here 3 years ago to take a job at Harlow & Associates, a mid-size accounting firm where I eventually made senior auditor. My family had called it running away. I called it the first decision I'd ever made entirely for myself. I turned my phone back over and reread the text. My stepmother. I'd called her by her first name, Lynette, since I was 14 and decided I was too old to call anyone mom who hadn't earned it. Had been building to this for months. The text had gotten shorter and colder. My dad's calls had thinned to nothing. My half-brother Corey had stopped responding to anything I sent him. But this was the first time someone had put it in writing. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I opened my laptop. There's a particular kind of clarity that comes when you've been waiting for something terrible for so long that when it finally arrives, you're almost relieved. I'd been waiting for this text, or something like it, for roughly 10 years. And I'd spent those years quietly, methodically, making sure that if it ever came, I would not be the one left scrambling. The first thing I did was go to the family streaming account. My name was on it. My card was on it. My dad had never updated it after I moved out because, as Lynette used to say, Hannah handles all the tech stuff. Except my name wasn't Hannah. My name is Ivy. And for the first time in a long time, I was about to handle something for myself. I changed the password. Then the recovery email. Then I turned off the autopay. Next was the phone plan. 3 lines. Mine, my dad's, and Corey's. All under my name because I'd added them when I got my corporate discount 6 years ago, and no one had ever asked to be removed. I logged in, split the lines, and moved Dad and Corey to their own account. I didn't cancel anything. I just detached. Their first bill would arrive in 4 weeks. Without my subsidy, it would be about $180 more than they were used to paying. I thought about calling my dad. I thought about it for about 4 seconds. Instead, I forwarded Lynette's text to my own email, added a timestamp note, and saved it to a folder I'd labeled, simply, Documentation. I'd had that folder for 2 years. It was not empty. I closed my laptop and went to bed. I want to be clear about something because I think people hear a story like this and assume the person telling it is either a saint or a monster. I'm neither. I'm a 31-year-old woman who grew up in a house where love was a transaction, and I learned early how to keep my own books. My mother died when I was 9. Ovarian cancer, fast and brutal. My dad remarried when I was 12. Lynette came with a son, Corey, who was 8, and I'll be fair, was just a kid caught in someone else's mess. I don't blame Corey for most of what happened. I blame the adults who let it happen. The dynamic in that house was never complicated to understand. It just took me years to admit what I was seeing. Corey was the future. I was the past. My dad, his name is Gerald, and I've come to understand that he is a weak man who loves easy, comfortable things, chose the future. Every time, without exception, he chose it. When Corey wanted to go to a private high school, the tuition came out of my college savings. My dad sat me down and told me it was a temporary borrow, that they'd replace it. They never did. I went to Oregon State on scholarships and 3 part-time jobs and graduated with $12,000 in loans. Corey went to a school in Arizona where the dorms had a pool. When Corey decided at 22 that he wanted to open a food truck, my dad asked me to co-sign the small business loan. I said no. That was the first time Lynette called me selfish to my face. It would not be the last. When my grandmother, my dad's mother, Grandma Fern, started needing more help a few years ago, I drove down to Medford every other weekend for 8 months. I organized her medication, set up her bill pay, coordinated with her doctor's office when her memory started slipping. Lynette visited twice. My dad visited 4 times and spent 3 of those visits watching football in the living room. Grandma Fern noticed. She never said much about it, but she noticed. Last spring she had a fall. She was in the hospital for 2 weeks and then moved into assisted living. She was 81 and sharp in ways that mattered, even when she was tired. During one of my visits, she asked me to bring her a specific box from her closet at her old house before the estate sale. A small cedar box with a brass clasp. She said there were some papers in it she wanted me to hold on to. I brought her the box. She went through it slowly, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to me. "Give that to Raymond when the time comes," she said. Raymond was her attorney. I'd met him twice during the healthcare proxy process. I asked her what it was. She patted my hand and said, "Insurance." I didn't open it. I filed it in my fireproof box at home behind my passport and my social security card, and I didn't think about it much. Grandma Fern seemed stable. She'd rallied after the fall in the way stubborn, practical women sometimes do. Then in February, she declined quickly. I drove down twice in 1 week. The second time, I sat with her for 6 hours. She slept most of it. My dad arrived the last hour, smelling like the airport and looking put upon. She passed on a Thursday morning. I got the call from the nursing facility before my alarm went off. I texted my dad. He responded 4 hours later with thanks for letting me know. The funeral was the following Monday. Small, the way she'd wanted. 12 people in a chapel in Medford. I arranged the flowers because no one else had done it. I wrote the obituary because Raymond asked me to. My dad gave a brief eulogy that mentioned his mother's good cooking 3 times and her kindness once. After the service, Raymond pulled me aside. "I'll be scheduling the estate reading for 2 weeks out," he said. "Your grandmother left specific instructions. I think you should know, before you're in the room with others, that the contents may be a surprise." I remembered the envelope. I drove home from Medford that afternoon with the windows down even though it was 45 degrees. I needed the cold air. I needed to feel something uncomplicated. The next morning, Lynette called. "We need to talk about the house," she said. No hello. No acknowledgement that my grandmother had just died 3 days before. Grandma Fern's house was a 3-bedroom craftsman in the Medford Hills. She'd owned it outright since the 1990s. My dad, as her only living child, had apparently already decided what would happen to it. "Your father and I have been thinking we'd use it as a vacation property," Lynette said. "Maybe eventually pass it to Corey. We just need to make sure the estate is handled cleanly." "Handled cleanly," I repeated. "You know how these things get messy. We want to make sure everyone's on the same page." She paused. "You should probably just let Raymond know you're not contesting anything. It'll go faster." I said I'd think about it. Then I called Raymond. He confirmed that my grandmother had updated her will 14 months ago. He would not tell me the specifics over the phone. He said to be at his office in Medford on the 14th, and to please arrive before my father. I arrived 20 minutes early. Raymond's office was on a quiet street downtown, the kind of place with real wood paneling and a receptionist who offered you actual coffee. I accepted. I sat in a chair by the window and watched the parking lot. My dad and Lynette arrived 7 minutes late. Corey was with them, which I hadn't expected. He was 27 now, broad-shouldered, wearing a jacket that still had a crease from wherever he'd bought it. He looked uncomfortable, which made 2 of us. We filed into Raymond's conference room. The table was polished oak, and the light came in at a low angle that made everyone look a little tired. My dad nodded at me. Lynette did not make eye contact. Corey looked at his phone. Raymond sat down, opened a folder, and began. He started with the assets. The house, appraised at far $10,000. A savings account with $64,000. A small investment portfolio, mostly index funds, valued at $118,000. A paid-off 2019 Chevrolet Forester. Personal property and furniture. Total estate approximately $610,000. Lynette's posture changed. She sat straighter. Under the table, I could see her fingers interlace with my dad's. Raymond cleared his throat. "The entirety of the estate," he said, looking up from the document, "is bequeathed to Ivy." Silence. Not the dramatic movie kind where someone gasps and music swells. The real kind. The kind where you hear the HVAC system and someone's chair creak, and the particular quality of 4 people not breathing at the same time. Lynette was the first to speak. "That's not right." Her voice was very controlled. "Gerald is her son. This has to be a mistake." "There is no mistake," Raymond said. "She wasn't of sound mind. She was evaluated by her physician 13 months ago. Her cognitive assessment is on file." Raymond's voice did not change. He had clearly done this before. My dad turned to look at me. I don't know what expression he expected to find on my face. What he found was that I was watching him. Ivy. His voice was low. "Did you know about this?" "I knew she wanted me to have the envelope," I said. "I didn't read it," which was true. I hadn't. I'd held on to it and trusted her. Lynette set her hand flat on the table. "This is manipulative. Fern was always trying to make Gerald feel guilty about the divorce, the first one. And this is just Mrs. Hollis," Raymond said, using Lynette's legal name, which she hated. "Your mother-in-law's will also includes a no-contest clause. Any challenge to the document by a named party results in forfeiture of a separate bequest." My dad frowned. "What bequest?" "You didn't mention, because I hadn't gotten there yet." Raymond flipped a page. "Gerald is named as a secondary beneficiary for $30,000 from the savings account, contingent on him not contesting the primary bequest to Ivy." The math happened in real time on my dad's face. $30,000 if he accepted. 0 plus legal fees if he fought it. Corey leaned forward. "What about me?" Raymond looked at him over his glasses. "You are not named in the document." Corey sat back. Lynette turned to me. The controlled voice was gone. "You did this. You spent all that time down there. You got into her head. I drove down every other weekend for 8 months," I said. It was the first time I'd spoken in several minutes and my voice came out steady. "I set up her medications. I talked to her doctors. I filed her insurance claims. I was there." I paused. "Where were you?" She opened her mouth. She closed it. Raymond asked if there were any questions about the distribution process. There were not. My dad signed the acknowledgement form without speaking. Lynette did not sign anything because there was nothing for her to sign. I stayed behind after they left. Raymond handed me a second envelope. This one sealed. My name on it in my grandmother's handwriting. I opened it in my car. It was a letter. 3 pages, written in the careful, slightly cramped cursive of someone who'd learned penmanship in the 1950s. I'm not going to reproduce it here. Some things are private. But the last paragraph said roughly, "I have watched you build your life with your own 2 hands and ask for nothing. I want you to have something that nobody can take credit for giving you but me." I sat in that parking lot for a while. My dad called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. "Ivy." His voice was the one he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "I want to talk about this like adults. Fern clearly had a complicated relationship with Lynette, and I think she let that affect her judgment. I'm not saying we can test anything. I just think, as her son, there's a conversation to be had about what's fair." Beat. "Call me back." I did not call him back. What I did do was call a property manager in Medford. The Craftsman was in good shape. Grandma Fern had kept it up. The property manager said it could rent for $2,100 a month without much trouble and possibly $2,400 with some light updates. I told her I'd like to make the updates first. She gave me a contractor recommendation. I also called my own attorney, a woman named Leslie who handled my aunt's estate 2 years ago and who had kept on retainer since because she's sharp, and I believe in maintaining useful relationships. I explained the situation. She confirmed there was nothing my father could do without triggering the no contest clause and losing his $30,000. "Does he know that?" she asked. "He's starting to figure it out." 3 weeks later, the text started. Not from my dad. From Corey. "Hey, I know things are weird right now. Can we talk?" I waited a day before responding. Corey and I had never been close, but I'd also never blamed him for the dynamic our parents created. He was 8 when they got married. He didn't pick any of this either. "Sure," I wrote back. "Call me." He called that night. He sounded genuinely uncomfortable, which I gave him credit for. "Look," he said. "I'm not calling to ask for anything. Mom is really upset and Dad is being weird about all of it and I kind of feel like I'm the only one who can see what's actually happening." "What do you think is actually happening?" I asked. Long pause. "I think Grandma Fern saw something in you that she didn't see in Dad. And I think that's hard for him. But it's also she wasn't wrong." That was probably the most honest thing Corey had ever said to me. I told him I appreciated it. I told him the door was open if he wanted to have an actual relationship, but that I wasn't going to be a back channel for his mother's grievances. He said he understood. He hasn't tried to use me as a back channel since. I think that's progress. My dad tried one more time. He drove up to Portland 4 hours each way, without calling first. He rang my buzzer on a Saturday morning. I happened to be home. I let him in. I made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table, which is small and honest, the way furniture in a place you've actually chosen for yourself tends to be. He said his piece. It took about 20 minutes. He talked about fairness, about family, about how his mother had loved me, but she'd also been, in his words, not entirely stable in her last years. He said Lynette had put a lot into the marriage and into Corey, and that the estate could have helped them get stable. He said he hoped I could find it in my heart to think about the bigger picture. I listened to all of it. I let him finish. Then I said, "Dad, you let her send that text, you liked it." He looked at his coffee. "I spent 8 months driving to Medford," I said. "I handled her doctors, her medications, her bills. I was there. You weren't. And when Grandma decided what she wanted to do with what she'd earned, she made her choice. That's the bigger picture." He didn't have much to say to that. We sat in silence for a while. It wasn't comfortable silence. It wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of two people finally being honest about the shape of what they actually are to each other. He left about an hour later. I watched his car pull out of the lot from my window. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that because I think revenge stories are supposed to end with the narrator feeling vindicated and powerful, and I didn't feel either of those things. I felt tired and a little sad, and also, underneath all of it, something like relief. The clean kind. The kind that comes when something you've been carrying for a long time finally gets set down. I renovated Grandma Fern's house over the summer. New kitchen fixtures, refinished floors, fresh paint throughout. I kept her cedar box and her reading chair, which is ugly and comfortable and sits now in the corner of my home office in Portland. The house in Medford rents for $2,350 a month. My tenant is a retired teacher who waters the garden and texts me when something needs fixing and is otherwise perfectly self-sufficient. The investment portfolio has grown. I'm not going to tell you by how much. That's mine. What I will tell you is this. My grandmother never once told me I was her favorite. She never made promises. She just watched and kept her own counsel, and at the end of it decided that I had earned something she could give. Not because I'd been strategic, not because I was angling for it, I genuinely hadn't been, but because I showed up. Consistently, without applause, without expectation. There's a particular kind of person who mistakes consistency for weakness. Who sees someone who shows up without demanding recognition and assumes that person will keep showing up no matter how they're treated. My dad is that kind of person. Lynette built a life around finding those people. I used to be easier to take for granted. I found a photograph last fall when I was cleaning out the last of Grandma Fern's storage unit. It was me at maybe 11 years old, sitting on the back steps of the Medford house with a book open in my lap, squinting into the sun. I don't remember anyone taking it. I don't know who did. I kept it. It's on my fridge now, held up by a magnet from a brewery I liked in Bend. That kid had no idea what was coming. But she had good instincts, and she was stubborn, and she learned to do things for herself before anyone else got the chance to take credit. I think she would be fine with how things turned out. If you're still waiting for the people who underestimated you to apologize, stop waiting. They won't. Not because they don't know, but because they do, and admitting it costs them too much. You don't need the apology. You just need to stop letting them write the ending. Change the locks. Keep the deed. I've thought a lot about why things ended the way they did. Not the legal part, that's straightforward enough. My grandmother updated her will, she included a no-contest clause, and the people who spent years treating me like a liability made exactly the move she anticipated. The outcome was almost mathematical. What I've thought about more is the longer arc. The cause and the effect, stretched out over 20 years. Gerald chose comfort over courage every single time. When Lynette needed him to take her side, he took her side. When it was easier to let me absorb the cost, financially, emotionally, in pure, unacknowledged labor, he let me absorb it. He wasn't cruel in the dramatic sense. He was just consistently, quietly willing to let someone else pay for his peace. That kind of choice doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. And eventually what you've accumulated is a daughter who stopped expecting anything from you, and a mother who watched all of it and made her own quiet decision. Grandma Fern didn't leave me her estate to punish Gerald. I really believe that. She left it to me because she'd watched me show up, year after year, without asking for recognition or reward, and she decided that's who she trusted, with what she'd spent a lifetime building. There's nothing mystical about it. It was just a woman with clear eyes, making a clear choice. Actions have weight. They accumulate. They mean something eventually to someone paying attention. That's the thing nobody tells you when you're the one who always shows up. You assume it goes unnoticed because nobody says thank you, but people notice. The ones who matter notice. Grandma Fern noticed every drive down to Medford, every medication sorted, every hour I spent on hold with her insurance company. She just wasn't the type to make a speech about it. She was the type to put it in a legal document. I think about the version of myself at 22, co-signing nothing for the food truck. Getting called selfish to my face for the first time. That version of me felt ashamed. She wondered if she was being cold, if she was failing at being a family. She second-guessed herself for weeks. I want to tell her you weren't being cold. You were being honest about what you could and couldn't carry. That's not selfishness. That's the beginning of integrity. Integrity is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It's just a slow accumulation of choices that align with what you actually believe, even when nobody's watching, even when nobody applauds. I drove to Medford because Grandma Fern needed someone to drive to Medford. That's the whole reason. And that turned out to be enough. Resilience isn't about being unbreakable. I cried in my car more than once during those 8 months. I sat in hospital waiting rooms and felt the particular loneliness of being the only person who showed up. I felt it, and then I went back the next weekend because she still needed someone to show up. If there's anything I'd want someone to take from this, not as a lesson, just as an observation from someone who lived it, it's that the people who underestimate you are usually doing it because it's convenient for them. It's not a verdict on who you are, it's information about who they are. Receive it as such and plan accordingly. Lynette called me an embarrassment to the family. My dad liked the message. Grandma Fern left me everything she had. That's the whole story.